Alright, I'm back at it again with the Chuck E. Cheese content, and in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look back at the history and evolution of another famous character from the brand, and this time, I'm going to be going over who I consider to be the most underrated character, Pasqually the Chef. Now, before we begin, I have a question for you that you can answer after watching, if you remember to. What is your favorite iteration of Pasqually? Mine is going to be obvious whenever it comes up. Anyways though, let's get into the video. So like all of the original Chuck E. Cheese characters, Pasqually P. Pieplate made his debut at the first ever Pizza Time Theater location, which opened in San Jose, California on May 17th, 1977. At this location, the animatronic performers were known as the Pizza Time Players, which consisted of Chuck E. Cheese, Krusty the Cat, the Warblets, Jasper T. Jowls, and finally, Pasqually, who was the only human in this cast made up of anthropomorphic animals. Now, as a clever way to cut corners and not make full-bodied animatronics, the characters here were put in frames, where only the upper parts of their bodies were seen, and Pasqually was placed right here, above the kitchen. Now, while Pasqually was put there because, duh, he's a chef, his placement over the kitchen actually served another purpose, as his gimmick was that, I guess whenever a show was not playing, he'd pop out and announce that an order was ready. But this was not something that was kept around long at all. In fact, some information implies it may have actually never been implemented. The main issue with this gimmick was that it was just not feasible. Food was being made way too fast for Pasqually to keep up, and it was also probably pretty annoying if it was happening frequently. Now, the name Pasqually seems to just be a different spelling of the name Pasquale, which is an Italian name, and that makes sense as Pasqually is Italian. Now, regarding the P and pie plate in his name, not quite sure what the P is meant to stand for, but the pie plate part of his name is almost certainly meant to reference a pizza, as they're occasionally called pies, and then I guess plate is just what you would eat it off of. Design-wise, Pasqually was pretty much just your stereotypical Italian chef. He's got that white outfit, the red scarf thing, the hat, and then that big, glorious mustache. Also in his hands, he would hold a pizza cutter and a tiny pizza. Like, wow, look at that thing. His head is like 3 times bigger than it. Pasqually also had a pretty good amount of curly hair on his head, which is more apparent on drawings of him used for marketing stuff. Now, personality and voice-wise, at his debut, Pasqually was voiced by Joe Spano, who, as would be expected, gave the character an Italian accent, a very thick one at that.
Hey, come on, Jasper, are you down? Yeah. You laugh at everything, even at my jokes.
But before Spano, there were a few test show tapes made, and in them, John Widelock, the original voice for Chuck, voiced every character, including Pasqually, and his version was maybe better. I don't know, they're both pretty good.
Mamma mia! Let me explain. I need more help with mixing the ingredients.
Now, for his personality and character, one of Pasqually's favorite things to do was tell pretty bad jokes. And although they were pretty lame puns, Jasper would find them hilarious and would easily be sent into a fit of laughter.
Hey, boss, you want to know why Jasper, you dog, took the car out in a storm?
No, but tell me anyway.
Because it was a driving rain.
What you two lack in intelligence, you make up for in stupidity.
Another thing about Pasqually was that on occasion, he would insult Chuck, but not without reason. As in his early years, Chuck was a rude little rat who would insult, as well as call his fellow Pizza Time players names. And Pasqually would be one of the few characters to sometimes get back at the rat.
Pasqually, why don't you lace up your mouth and run out your head as a football?
Hey, boss, why don't you stick your tail in your mouth and rent yourself out as a hula hoop?
And other than those points I just mentioned, Pasqually would also just sing with the rest of the Pizza Time players, as well as participate in the skits and stuff like that. Now, after listening to a handful of show tapes, it seems like Pasqually was not really used quite as often as the other characters were. Like Krusty and Jasper, for example, have songs where they perform the whole thing, but I don't think Pasqually ever did anything like that. Seems like he was mainly used for backup vocals, with the exception of this very short clip here.
And now, Pasqually, the only human being more or less on the show.
When the moon hits you, I like a bigger pizza pie. It's a Pasqually. I'm a Pasqually.
I say this with unsureness, as he very well could have had his own song and segments centered around him, but I didn't see any. Although, in a demo show tape where John Widelock was voicing him, Pasqually did have his own song, and this was the only time I could find an example of this happening, which is funny as due to it being a demo tape, I don't believe it was ever used.
Pizza, pizza.
pizza, pizza in the air. You take the mustard, chili, butter, jelly, bam, and jelly dough. Cook them in the oven, then I'll serve it up and dish it up and cook it up and eat it up for you.
Yeah, that's pretty much what song I would expect him to perform. I think that's pretty much all there is to say about this OG Pasqually animatronic and character, so let's move on to his second appearance, which would come at the second ever Pizza Time Theater location, which, just like the first, would also be opened in San Jose, California, but this time in December of 1978. And at this location, Pasqually was still in the frame sort of setup, but his design was slightly different. He no longer had a pizza cutter, his head was a bit smaller, and I think his eyes are bigger, but it could just look like that since his face is smaller. All the major features found on the old Pasqually are still here though. Now nothing else to really say about his appearance, as other than what I just mentioned, everything else was pretty much the same. Something else Pasqually did at this second location was kind of like a retry at the idea of Pasqually announcing when orders were done. Here he would instead announce whenever the Chuck E. Cheese walk-around character would be coming out.
Ladies and gentlemen, and all you kids, we got a special surprise for you. Here's Chucky!
So now we'll move on to the third Pizza Time Theater location, which opened in Concord, California on May 23rd, 1979. Now this is when the animatronics got quite the drastic change. So originally the animatronics were made by the company Fantasy Forest, but those ones were pretty pricey and essentially homemade. So beginning at this third location, a new animatronic type was introduced, known as the Cyberamics, which were designed to be more simple to make as well as cheaper to make. As due to Pizza Time Theater planning on opening many more locations, they wanted to make sure they could do it in both a cost-effective and timely manner, and these new Cyberamics were perfect for that. In Pasqually's case, he got a bit leaner in his design, with him now being taller, thinner, and having longer arms. He also still has that tiny pizza. Now this version you're seeing here was a prototype of this new Cyberamic idea, and was only ever used, or at least was only ever documented being used, at the third location, which, like I said earlier, opened in 1979. Now after this third location with its prototype Cyberamics, new Cyberamic designs were made for the locations going forward, and the designs would not differ too much between each location opening around this time, with these designs being the standard, at least for quite a bit. But before I get into that, I have something else to mention, that being guest characters. This was something done for a few years, where they would add a new animatronic mech at every location, for the most part, and they would have a few different outer cosmetics for this mech, so the character could be changed out. The reason for this was to get people to visit multiple times, as one week you'd go see, for example, Sally Sachet performing, and then the next week she would be gone and you would see Madame Oink. And regarding Pasqually, I want to bring up Madame Oink specifically, because Pasqually sings a song about his relationship with her, and, well, you can just take a listen for yourself.
And now, Pasqually singing about his ex, that famous piggy from Paris, Madame Oink.
Oh, I don't want her, you can have her. She's too fat for me. She's too fat for me. She's too fat for me.
Oh, he don't want her, you can have her.
Do that for me. She's too fat, she's too fat, she's too fat for me.
So according to this song, Pasqually and Madame Oink were dating or something, but apparently the two broke up, as Pasqually thought she was too fat. I think what should be more concerning here is that Pasqually, a human, was romantically involved with a pig. That seems a bit questionable, and at the very least, doomed from the start. Okay, with that over, let's get back into Pasqually's animatronics. As beginning in 1980, looking back at the second ever location, it had its portrait format done away with, and for clarification, they were not using the Cyberamics here just yet. But beginning in 1980, they would begin to use them. And this change came with a brand new stage format, known as the balcony stage, and like I said, this was implemented for the very first time in the second ever location. So now instead of being spread around the room in individual picture frames, the animatronics were now on a singular stage altogether to make the show easier to follow. And with Pasqually's design here, it had the same idea as the previous iterations, but the stylization, I suppose it would be called, was a bit different, but the outfit was the same. He also lost his little pizza, which is pretty sad, but he gained an instrument, that being the concertina, which is very similar to an accordion. And with Pasqually on this new balcony stage, he would be found on the far right side of it. Now throughout the years I've went over so far, Rockstar, Joe Spano had voiced Pasqually for all of them. But in 1982, Scott Wilson, the voice actor for Mr. Munch, would voice Pasqually for a singular show tape. And this was kind of like a bit of foreshadowing, as beginning in 1984, Scott Wilson would take over the role entirely. And with this new voice, Pasqually was pretty much the same, but just a bit more nice. Not a huge difference, but just a bit noticeable.
Everyone loves to sing in Italy. Most definitely. And since it's in my hometown, I started with one of my favorites.
In 1984, after Pizza Time Theater had been struggling financially for quite a while, their biggest competitor, Showbiz Pizza Place, who was also struggling a lot financially, just not quite as much, would buy out Pizza Time Theater, and the two would merge into a singular company. And a few years after this, specifically in 1986, Pasqually went and got a new voice actor, that being Bob West, who took the role from Scott Wilson. And for a little fun fact, West is probably best known for being the voice actor for Barney the Dinosaur. He was also the voice actor for Jasper T. Jowls around this time. Now, Bob West's version of Pasqually would be similarly to Wilson's, more friendly. Not to say Spano's version was like mean or anything, he was just now like overly friendly. Now, something Pasqually did keep from his OG days was his tendency to tell pretty mediocre jokes.
I wish I had someone to give a kiss to.
Well, I wouldn't mind a little peck on the cheek.
And this take on Pasqually would continue into the next stage format, known as Chucky's House, or the Rocker Stage. And while Jasper, Chuck, and Helen were now full-bodied animatronics, Mr. Munch and Pasqually were only seen through the windows of the house, meaning they did not need a full body, so they still remained only half-bodied. Something pretty interesting that I feel is worth mentioning, occasionally the animatronics would get costume changes depending on the theme for the show, and in Pasqually's case, here is Cowboy Pasqually and Bandstand Pasqually. Now, jumping up to the year 1989, in that year, something known as concept unification began. And in this plan, since the same company now both owned Showbiz and Pizza Time Theater, they wanted to drop the Rockafire Explosion characters, which were the animatronic band at Showbiz, and replace them with the Chuck E. Cheese characters. And concept unification was the plan on how to go about doing this, as due to it being a costly waste to get rid of the Showbiz character robots, they instead just stripped them down of their outer cosmetics to have the new Chuck E. Cheese character cosmetics put in their place. Now, this idea, which was essentially recycling the old Rockafire mechs, was tested at 2 locations in Texas. And in only these prototype locations, Pasqually took over the animatronic for Fats Geronimo, who was the keyboardist at Showbiz. And as you can see here, instead of playing a keyboard, Pasqually was put in front of a table, meant to look like he was making food. He also had his own side of the stage, decorated to look like his kitchen. Now, like I said, this was only a prototype stage format, and in the finalized one, that was rolled out to every Showbiz pizza location, and completed in every location by 1990, Pasqually took over the animatronic for Duke LaRue, meaning Pasqually was now a drummer. This new show, which was known as Munch's Make-Believe Band, also marked the first widely used stage format to feature a full-bodied Pasqually animatronic, with legs. And as you can see, Pasqually's design here is quite different than his previous Cyberamic one. Pasqually now had a latex mask for his face, and I said this in the Jasper video, I do not like the latex masks on these characters. They always just look unbelievably creepy. Like, look at this and tell me this is not horrifying. So after every Showbiz pizza location had its Rockafire Explosion band switched out for the Chuck E. Cheese characters, the Chuck E. Cheese locations that had the other stage types, like the rocker and balcony stages, were remodeled to take their Cyberamics and put them in the Munch's Make-Believe Band format. So that's why the animatronics differed so much between locations, as the former Showbiz locations had the creepy latex mask animatronics, while the other locations had the Cyberamic ones. Now this begs the question, how did Pasqually go from the balcony and rocker stage to the Make-Believe Band stage? As you may recall, he had no bottom part to his body. Well, he simply just had legs added to him, with the exception of this stage here, known as the road stage. This version had Pasqually behind this building looking thing, and he had no lower body behind it. Design-wise for Pasqually while all this was going on, he remained surprisingly pretty much the same, and his personality too was pretty similar. He would continue to tell his dumb jokes as well as just be a friendly chef. In 1996 and 1997, a new stage type was introduced, which only featured Chuck in animatronic form, and this was known as the Awesome Adventure Machine. And while Pasqually did not appear as an animatronic here, the stage format included these large screens, and on them, the rest of Munch's Make-Believe make-believe band would still appear, but in the form of costumed characters. And Pasqually's costume here had a gigantic head. That's about all I have to say about it. Now, this awesome Adventure Machine stage format did not go far, as it was way too ambitious as well as expensive. So a bit of a compromise was made for the next stage type that would actually be widely rolled out. And this was known as Studio C. This stage, once again, featured Chuck as the only animatronic, as well as it had a screen, but they cut back on all of the crazy effects. And here Pasqually would still appear on the screen in segments, as a costumed character, and also as a puppet. So that's pretty fun. Now, beginning in the late 90s, about 1999, Bob West would no longer be the voice for Pasqually, and the role would be taken over by Earl Fisher. But before I get into that, I have something else to mention. In the Chuck E. Cheese movie, yeah, you heard me right, Chuck E. Cheese and the Galaxy 5000, Pasqually is in the movie, but while the other characters are in costume form, Pasqually is just a guy. And here he was played by Stephen Lange, or Lange, I'm not sure. And I don't know why, but this is just so funny to me. Everyone else is a costume, but not Pasqually. And it makes no sense because he did have one, not a very good one, but he still had one. It's funny to me because it gives the impression this is just a guy pretending to be Pasqually, and no one else has noticed yet. His accent is also just not doing it for me. It kind of just sounds like he's doing this. I prefer the much more over-the-top accent.
Now that the prize of money she saws are high, the racing is a much faster and more cutthroat.
Cutthroat?
I really don't know why, but this is just hilarious to me. Okay, back to what I was saying earlier. In 1999, Earl Fisher would take on the role of voicing Pasqually, and he's been the voice actor ever since.
Don't wanna work 'cause I'm lazy, yeah. I don't wanna work 'cause I'm lazy. Let me sleep.
And around this time, Pasqually got a slight redesign that was only seen in drawings of the character and on some of the walk-around costumes. And this was probably Pasqually's biggest design change ever, up to this point I mean. He lost his red and white plaid shirt, and instead wore a blue shirt. That should go to show just how little his design has changed, where a simple shirt color difference is his biggest change so far. Also, sometimes his walk-around character would wear oven mitts, which I just find kind of funny looking. Why would he wear those out of the kitchen? You're gonna get them dirty, man. You know how nasty the Chuck E. Cheese arcade games are? Now, jumping up to the year 2013, Pasqually would once again get a redesign, known as Rockstar Pasqually, to go along with Rockstar Chuck, where he would still have the blue shirt as well as the apron, but he lost the red scarf, and also his face design was a bit different. The loss of that scarf is pretty substantial, as he had been wearing it since his first ever appearance. I don't hate this design, only complaint I have is that it feels a bit generic, and also looks weirdly old, but everyone else here looks like a young character, and then Pasqually is just this 50-year-old dude hanging out with him. But that's only really an issue in 3D renders of him. The puppet and walk-around character look fine enough. The walk-around character actually looks a lot better compared to whatever this was. I do gotta say though, this design has nothing on human Pasqually.
Either gonna get you to the Galaxy 5000 in a flash.
This version is so good, it's gotta be my favorite. And this here is Pasqually's current design. And since the animatronics in the Chuck E. Cheese locations were removed, except for the legacy stores, I don't have any more animatronic updates to give. Well, new ones, that is. I have something to say about Pasqually's animatronics, but that'll come in a moment. First, I actually want to talk about a bit of controversy surrounding Pasqually. So back in 2020, during the pandemic and all of that fun stuff, Chuck E. Cheese had to close due to it, which makes sense. That place was probably a breeding ground for sickness. So since the locations were closed, the higher-ups did not want to shut down completely, so they would continue to serve food through delivery services, such as DoorDash. But since most people aren't gonna hop online to order food from Chuck E. Cheese of all places, a new name was adopted, that name being Pasqually's Pizza and Wings, named after Chuck E. Cheese's one and only chef. The controversy here was very mild. A few people were just upset that they were unknowingly eating food from Chuck E. Cheese, just under a different name. The name was actually retired this year, but they still have delivery, just under the Chuck E. Cheese name, instead of their weird alter ego. Now, something else to talk about Pasqually is in regards to his animatronics. animatronic, which, like I said earlier, is no longer in every Chuck E. Cheese location, but recently, there have been these places known as Chuck's Arcade opening up, which is pretty much just a regular arcade, but themed around the old Pizza Time Theater days for the brand. And while there are no performing animatronics here, they do have some of the Cyberamic ones on display, which at first glance may seem like a fun idea, but there is one major downside to this, as to put them in their poses they're in, the inner workings of the animatronic have to be essentially destroyed, which is a pretty major shame. It's a very cool idea to display the animatronics, but it would have been much cooler to actually let them perform, and not let Pasqually be a glorified taxidermied chef. Now, where Pasqually goes next is not entirely clear, but like I said regarding Jasper in his video, as long as the Chuck E. Cheese brand sticks around, I'm sure their chef will too. And there you have it, a look back at Chuck E. Cheese's underrated chef. And if you enjoyed this video, a subscription, a like, and maybe even a comment would be greatly appreciated. Now, I don't really do this, but I think I know what my next video is going to be about, and it's going to be once again Chuck E. Cheese related, as well as Christmas related. I found something very interesting that I definitely want to talk about. If it works out, something may come up during it, and it just isn't able to be made into a video, but if it is, I'm totally going to do it. So maybe that'll make you more inclined to subscribe and stick around. I'm not going to become a Chuck E. Cheese channel or anything, but I do like talking about the brand. Anyways though, with that, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.